Every year, millions of tourists photograph a pink hotel on Waikiki Beach. They order Mai Tais by the water, watch a sunset hula performance, and never once wonder whose land they are standing on. But beneath that pink plaster lies one of the most elaborate acts of erasure in American history. The Royal Hawaiian Hotel was built in 1927 on ground that Hawaiian kings had called home for 4 centuries, financed by the same corporations that helped overthrow Hawaii's queen, and constructed on wetlands drained to destroy the indigenous community that lived there. It was never just a hotel, it was a machine for selling paradise back to the people who stole it. Chapter 1. The Queen Who Stood in Their Way. In 1893, 13 men decided that a queen was bad for business. They called themselves the Committee of Safety. The name was deliberately boring. It sounded like something from a town council meeting, a group concerned with fire codes and building inspections. In reality, these 13 men were among the wealthiest businessmen in the Hawaiian Islands. Most were the sons or grandsons of American missionaries who had come to save Hawaiian souls and stayed to take Hawaiian land. They owned sugar plantations, shipping agencies, and trading houses. And in January of 1893, they had a problem. Her name was Liliuokalani. Queen Liliuokalani had ascended to the throne 2 years earlier, and she had watched for a decade as foreign businessmen stripped her people of political power. The tool of that theft was a document called the Bayonet Constitution of 1887, forced upon her brother King Kalakaua at gunpoint. It did exactly what its name implied. The Constitution stripped the monarch of executive authority, gave the vote to wealthy foreign residents, and imposed property requirements that disenfranchised most native Hawaiians. By design, it handed political control of the kingdom to the very men who held economic control. The plantation owners could now write the laws that governed their own plantations. Liliuokalani intended to fix this. She drafted a new constitution that would restore voting rights to her people and return meaningful power to the crown. She understood the stakes. She understood the risk. What she may not have fully understood was that the men who profited from the Bayonet Constitution had no intention of letting a queen undo their work. The Committee of Safety moved quickly. They met in secret. They drafted a resolution calling for the queen's removal. And they sent a quiet message to John L. Stevens, the United States minister to Hawaii, a man who had already written to Washington recommending annexation. On January 16, 1893, Stevens ordered 160 armed Marines from the USS Boston to march through the streets of Honolulu. They took positions near the government buildings and the royal palace. Their rifles faced the Queen's Guard. The next day, the Committee of Safety read their proclamation. The Hawaiian monarchy was abolished. A provisional government composed almost entirely of the same businessmen who had organized the coup took power. Liliuokalani surrendered under protest, yielding not to the Republic of Hawaii, but, as she carefully stated, to the superior military force of the United States. She believed Washington would investigate, recognize the illegality of the overthrow, and restore her throne. She was half right. President Grover Cleveland did investigate. His special commissioner, James Blount, concluded that the overthrow was illegal, that Stevens had conspired with the plotters, and that the Marines had acted improperly. Cleveland called the whole affair a disgrace. He recommended restoration of the Queen. The provisional government simply refused. Cleveland lacked the political will to use force, and Congress had no appetite for a fight over a Pacific island most Americans could not find on a map. For 5 years, Hawaii existed in a legal limbo, no longer a kingdom, not yet American territory. Then came the Spanish-American War, and suddenly, the United States wanted a naval base in the Pacific. Hawaii's strategic value overrode whatever moral qualms remained. In 1898, Congress passed a joint resolution annexing the islands. No treaty with any Hawaiian authority was signed. No vote of the Hawaiian people was taken. A kingdom became a territory with the stroke of a pen. The businessmen who had organized the overthrow got everything they wanted, not just political control, not just favorable trade terms under the existing reciprocity treaty that had made their sugar duty free in American markets since 1875. They got permanent security. Their investments were now protected by the full force of the United States government. The hostile takeover was complete. But they were not finished. Political control was only the foundation. What these men intended to build on top of it would take another 3 decades to fully reveal itself. And it would begin, as so many things in Hawaii did, with sugar. Chapter 2. 5 companies that owned everything. By 1920, 5 corporations controlled 90% of Hawaii's sugar, and sugar controlled everything else. The names of these 5 companies would mean nothing to most Americans today. Castle and Cook, Alexander and Baldwin, C. Brewer and Company, American Factors, and Theo H. Davies. They were collectively known as the Big Five, and they operated less like competing businesses than like divisions of a single conglomerate. Their directors sat on each other's boards. Their families intermarried. Their children attended the same schools, joined the same clubs, and inherited the same assumptions about who deserved to run the islands and who deserved to work the fields. The numbers tell the story more precisely than any metaphor. The Big Five controlled 36 of the 38 sugar plantations in the territory. They owned the banks that financed the crops. They owned the insurance companies that covered the risks. They owned the utilities that powered the mills. And, critically, they owned or controlled Matson Navigation Company, the dominant shipping line between Hawaii and the mainland. If you grew sugar in Hawaii, a Big Five company processed it. A Big Five company insured it. A Big Five company shipped it. A Big Five bank held your mortgage. The system was not merely dominant, it was airtight. Sugar production reached staggering scale. By the early 1920s, Hawaii exported over 1 million tons of raw sugar annually, making the territory one of the largest sugar producers on Earth. The revenue flowed in a single direction, west, across the Pacific, to corporate headquarters and shareholder accounts in San Francisco. The wealth was extracted with an efficiency that would have impressed any colonial administration in history. The labor system that made this possible was designed with equal precision. The Big Five recruited workers from China, Japan, Portugal, the Philippines, and Korea, settling each ethnic group in separate plantation camps. The division was strategic. Workers who could not communicate across language barriers could not organize across racial lines. Pay scales differed by ethnicity. Housing differed by ethnicity. The entire architecture of daily life on a sugar plantation reinforced the principle that workers were interchangeable units sorted by origin, not people with common interests. Native Hawaiians, meanwhile, found themselves marginalized in their own homeland. Dispossessed of political power by the overthrow, stripped of communal land rights by decades of foreign legal frameworks, and outnumbered by imported labor, they watched as their islands were reorganized around a crop most of them had never planted, and a profit most of them would never share. This was the economic machine that hummed beneath Hawaii's postcard beauty. 5 companies, 36 plantations, 1 shipping line, interlocking boards, divided labor. And by 1920, the men who ran this machine began to see that sugar alone was not enough. The world price fluctuated. Competition from Cuban and Philippine cane was rising. The smart money needed a second engine. They found it in the passengers. Matson Navigation was already carrying tourists alongside sugar on its San Francisco to Honolulu route. The numbers were small but growing, and the profit margins on a wealthy traveler paying for a luxury cabin were far more attractive than the margins on a ton of raw cane. The Big Five did not need to invent tourism in Hawaii. They needed to industrialize it. The man who saw this most clearly was Edward Tenney, president of Castle & Cooke and chairman of the Matson board. And the plan he conceived would turn a beachfront strip of reclaimed marshland into the most famous resort destination in the Pacific. Interior Chapter 3, The Grand Scheme They Drew on Paper. Edward Tenney and William Roth did not just want to build a hotel. They wanted to build a machine. Tenney was the numbers man. As president of Castle & Cooke and chairman of the Matson Navigation Company board, he could see the entire supply chain from sugar field to shipping lane to hotel lobby. William Roth, Matson's managing director in San Francisco, understood the mainland customer. Together, in 1925, they devised what they called the Grand Scheme, and the name was not ironic. It was a vertically integrated tourism engine with 3 interlocking components designed to capture a wealthy traveler's money from the moment they left San Francisco to the moment they returned. The first component was a new flagship ocean liner, the SS Malolo. Matson would build the fastest, most luxurious passenger ship on the Pacific route, cutting the San Francisco to Honolulu, crossing from 6 days to 4.5. The vessel would cost $3,500,000, carry over 650 passengers, and feature amenities designed to compete with Atlantic liners: a swimming pool, a ballroom, staterooms paneled in koa wood. The second component was a new luxury hotel on Waikiki Beach, not a modest inn or a converted boarding house, but a statement property, something grand enough to justify the ocean crossing, something that would become the destination itself. The third component was the Waialae Golf and Country Club, built to occupy the daylight hours between beach and cocktail service. Together, these 3 investments would create a closed commercial loop. Matson carried the passengers. The Royal Hawaiian housed them. The golf course entertained them. And every dollar spent, from the first cocktail on the ship to the last souvenir in the lobby, circled back to the same shareholders. The site Tenney chose for the hotel was 15 acres on Waikiki Beach, a stretch of ground known as Helumoa. The name meant chicken scratch in Hawaiian, a reference to the roosters that once roamed a coconut grove planted there centuries earlier. But Helumoa was far more than its humble name suggested. This land had been a retreat for Hawaiian royalty for over 400 years. Chiefs and kings had gathered beneath its 10,000 coconut palms. It was sacred ground in the most literal sense, a place where Hawaiian power, culture, and spiritual life had been centered for longer than most European capitals had existed. By 1925, the land belonged to the Bernice Pauahi Bishop Estate, a trust created by the last direct descendant of the Kamehameha royal line. Princess Bernice Pauahi Bishop had watched the American takeover with clear eyes. She knew what was coming. When she died in 1884, she left her vast land holdings, roughly 9% of all the land in Hawaii, in a trust dedicated to educating Hawaiian children. Her will specified that the land should be held, not sold. The income from leasing it would fund schools. The land itself would remain. The Bishop Estate granted Castle and Cook a long-term lease on the Helumoa property. The terms were favorable to the developer. The arrangement created a knot of irony that would tighten for a century. The trust created to protect Hawaiian heritage would now generate revenue from a luxury resort built on sacred Hawaiian land, designed by mainland architects, financed by the very oligarchy that had helped destroy Hawaiian sovereignty. The education of Hawaiian children would be funded, in part, by the commercial exploitation of Hawaiian culture. Tenney hired Warren and Wetmore, the New York architectural firm famous for designing Grand Central Terminal, the Biltmore Hotel, and the Ritz-Carlton. He wanted the best. He wanted famous. He wanted names that would impress mainland society columnists and reassure San Francisco investors that this was not some tropical gamble, but a serious world-class enterprise. The budget was set at $4 million. The timeline was 18 months. The vision was committed to paper, a 600-room luxury resort, the largest and most expensive hotel in the Pacific, built on royal Hawaiian ground, financed by sugar money, designed by New York architects, and connected to San Francisco by the fastest ship on the ocean. Every element locked into every other element. The machine was ready to be built. But first, something had to be destroyed. Chapter 4. They drained the water to bury the past. Before the first brick of the Royal Hawaiian could be laid, 625 acres of living wetland had to die. The Waikiki that tourists know today, that narrow strip of imported sand backed by high-rise hotels, bears no resemblance to the Waikiki that existed for centuries before the canal was dug. In the early 1900s, Waikiki was water. Streams flowed down from the Manoa and Palolo valleys and spread across a broad coastal plain, creating a network of fish ponds, taro patches, rice paddies, and wetland gardens that had sustained Hawaiian communities for generations. The name Waikiki itself means spouting fresh water, a reference to the natural springs that bubbled up across the marshland. Ducks moved through the reeds. Fish filled the ponds. Farmers waded knee-deep in flooded fields, growing kalo, the staple crop that Hawaiians considered not merely food, but family, descended from the same divine source as the Hawaiian people themselves. This was not wilderness. It was one of the most productive agricultural landscapes in the Pacific, cultivated and managed by native Hawaiians, and, by the late 19th century, by Chinese and Japanese immigrant farmers who had established thriving rice paddies alongside the older taro fields. It was alive, working, and home to hundreds of families. It was also standing in the way. In 1906, a man named Lucius Pinkham wrote a letter that would seal Waikiki's fate. Pinkham was president of the Board of Health, and his letter, addressed to the territorial government, proposed draining the Waikiki wetlands. His stated reason was public health. The marshes bred mosquitoes. Standing water posed sanitation risks. The argument was convenient and not entirely wrong, but Pinkham's letter contained a more revealing passage. Draining Waikiki, he wrote, would make the area attractive for the better class of tourists and dramatically increase land values. The public health argument was the wrapping paper. The gift inside was real estate. The instrument of destruction was the Alawai Canal. Construction began in 1921 and continued through 1928. The canal was designed to intercept the streams flowing into Waikiki and redirect them into a single concrete channel that dumped directly into the ocean. It was, in engineering terms, a simple project. Dig a ditch, divert the water, let the wetlands dry out. In ecological and cultural terms, it was catastrophic. The fish ponds died first. Without flowing fresh water, the carefully maintained systems that had produced fish protein for Hawaiian communities for centuries simply ceased to function. The taro fields followed. Kalo requires standing fresh water. When the streams were diverted, the fields became dry dirt. The rice paddies, nyalk, which had supported immigrant farming families, cracked and hardened. 625 acres of productive inhabited agricultural land was systematically dehydrated. The families who lived and worked this land were displaced. There was no organized relocation program, no compensation for lost livelihoods. The water simply stopped coming, and without water, the land could not support the people who depended on it. Native Hawaiian farming families, Chinese rice growers, Japanese vegetable gardeners, all were pushed out as the economic foundation beneath their feet was literally drained away. What replaced the wetlands was empty, dry, developable land, and the market responded exactly as Pinkham had predicted. Property values in Waikiki exploded. Land that had been worth $500 per acre as productive wetland was suddenly worth $7,000 per acre as dry real estate. The same ground that had fed families for centuries was now worth 14 times more as a place to build hotels. The Alawai Canal was framed as a public works project, a sanitation improvement, a gift to the community. In practice, it was a land clearance operation. It converted a living indigenous landscape into a blank canvas for commercial development. It eliminated the physical evidence of centuries of Hawaiian and immigrant agricultural life. And it created the dry, flat, buildable ground on which the Royal Hawaiian Hotel would rise. The timing was not accidental. Construction of the canal overlapped precisely with the planning and construction of the hotel. The grand scheme required dry land. The canal provided it. One project made the other possible. The same business interests that pushed for the hotel pushed for the canal. The same vision of Waikiki as a tourist destination rather than a farming community drove both. By the time the canal was finished, the transformation was complete. Where there had been water, there was now sand. Where there had been taro, there were now building lots. Where there had been a community, there was now a construction site. The foundation of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel was not concrete and steel. It was erasure. And over that erasure, the builders would now raise the most beautiful building in the Pacific. Geos Chapter 5. A palace built on someone else's dream. The architects who designed Grand Central Terminal arrived in Honolulu and decided Hawaii should look like Spain. Warren and Wetmore were among the most celebrated architectural firms in America. Their portfolio included some of the most recognizable buildings in New York City. When they accepted the Royal Hawaiian Commission, they brought with them a set of aesthetic assumptions rooted in the American mainland's idea of tropical luxury, which had nothing to do with Hawaii and everything to do with Southern California and the Mediterranean revival style sweeping wealthy American resort towns. The design they produced was Spanish Moorish, pink stucco walls, arched colonnades, bell tower silhouettes, ornamental tile work inspired by Andalusian palaces. The building would look like something from Seville transplanted to the Pacific, a hacienda swollen to 600 rooms and planted on a beach where Polynesian navigators had once pulled their canoes ashore. The choice was telling. The most expensive hotel in Hawaii would contain almost nothing architecturally Hawaiian. The designers looked at one of the most distinctive indigenous cultures on Earth and decided it was not sophisticated enough for their clients. Even the famous pink color had no Hawaiian origin. According to accounts from the period, the shade was inspired by a trip to Lisbon that a friend of the developers had taken. The pink plastered buildings along the Tagus River had made an impression, and that impression traveled across the Atlantic and then across the Pacific to coat the walls of a hotel on Hawaiian royal land. The color that would become the hotel's most iconic feature was borrowed from Portugal. Not one element of the building's visual identity acknowledged the culture of the ground it stood on. Construction began in earnest in late 1925. The site presented immediate problems. This was former marshland, drained but not stable. Workers drove wooden piles deep into the soft ground to create a foundation, and even then the building showed a tendency to settle unevenly. The engineers adapted. They poured more concrete. They adjusted the structural loads. They fought the land itself, which seemed to resist the weight being placed upon it. During excavation, workers made a discovery that would become one of the most haunting details in the hotel's history. They unearthed smooth, rounded stones, dozens of them, buried in the soil. These were not random rocks. They were ulu mica stones, used in an ancient Hawaiian game similar to bowling, rolled along carefully prepared earthen tracks by chiefs and commoners for centuries. The stones were physical proof that this specific piece of ground had been a gathering place, a site of recreation and community life for the Hawaiian people long before any foreigner set foot on the islands. The stones were removed. Construction continued. There is no record of any ceremony, any pause, any formal acknowledgement that the builders were digging through the material evidence of another civilization to pour the foundations of their own. The ulu mica stones were treated as construction debris, obstacles to be cleared from a building site. Centuries of Hawaiian life, compressed into smooth stone, were simply taken out of the way. In over 18 months, the building rose. The scale was enormous for its time and place. The hotel stretched across the Helumoa beachfront, its 6 stories making it the tallest structure on Waikiki. 60 tons of stucco were applied to the exterior walls. 10,000 gallons of paint, mixed to match that remembered shade of Lisbon pink, covered the stucco. 800 rooms, later revised to 600 as designs evolved, were fitted with custom furniture and fixtures shipped from the mainland. The landscaping was equally deliberate. The ancient coconut grove at Helumoa, which had once held 10,000 trees, was thinned and shaped into an ornamental garden. Tropical plants were imported and arranged to create a curated vision of paradise that was, in fact, a garden designed by mainland landscape architects. And the wildness was edited, the abundance was controlled, nature itself was cast as a hotel amenity. Inside, the hotel was outfitted for the expectations of America's wealthiest travelers. Each room had a private bathroom, a luxury that was far from standard in the 1920s. The lobby featured soaring ceilings, dark wood furniture, and arrangements of tropical flowers that would become a signature. The dining room could seat hundreds. A grand ballroom awaited orchestras and evening dances. And then there was the staff. 300 employees were hired to operate the hotel, and many of them were the children of plantation workers, the sons and daughters of the very labor force the Big Five had imported to cut cane. In a detail that captures the era's racial theatrics, some staff members were dressed in what management called Hawaiian costumes. Outfits meant to evoke a vague, generalized Asian exoticism for the entertainment of white guests. Workers whose parents had been recruited from Asia to serve the sugar economy now served the tourism economy, wearing costumes that reduced their heritage to set decoration. The hotel was finished in early 1927. It had taken 18 months, $4 million, and the erasure of centuries of Hawaiian life. The machine was built, the rooms were ready, and on February 1st, the doors opened to the wealthiest people in America. What they walked into was the most beautiful lie in the Pacific. Chagtagsorsen, the most beautiful trap in the Pacific. On opening night, the 1,200 guests raised their glasses on land that a dying princess had set aside to save her people. The gala on February 1st, 1927, was the most lavish social event Hawaii had ever seen. The guest list read like a registry of American wealth and fame. Matson Navigation had dispatched the SS Malolo for a special inaugural voyage, filling its cabins with industrialists, socialites, and newspaper columnists who would carry the story back to the mainland. The women wore evening gowns. The men wore white dinner jackets. Hawaiian musicians played beneath the coconut palms of Helumoa, the ancient grove now strung with electric lights and recast as tropical scenery for a party. The room rate was $14 a night. Adjusted for inflation, that is roughly $250, a sum that placed the Royal Hawaiian firmly in the domain of the very rich. And the very rich came. In its early years, the hotel hosted Rockefellers, DuPonts, Fords, and a rotating cast of Hollywood royalty. Charlie Chaplin stayed, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks stayed. The hotel appeared in society columns from San Francisco to New York, exactly as Tenney and Roth had planned. Each mention was free advertising. Each celebrity visit reinforced the idea that Waikiki was the place to be seen. The grand scheme functioned precisely as designed. Matson's flagship carried the passengers from San Francisco. The Royal Hawaiian housed them in splendor. The Waialae Golf and Country Club gave them something to do between sunrise swims and sunset cocktails. Every transaction, the cabin fare, the room charge, the greens fee, the bar tab, fed revenue to the same interlocking corporate structure. The money never left the system. It simply circled from tourist wallet to hotel register, to corporate ledger, to San Francisco shareholders. The Big Five had built, in the middle of the Pacific, a closed economic loop disguised as a vacation. But the true cost of this machine was not measured in dollars. It was measured in what it did to the culture on which it was built. Consider Duke Kahanamoku. By the 1920s, Duke was the most famous Hawaiian alive. He was an Olympic gold medalist in swimming, a global ambassador for the sport of surfing, and a man whose physical grace and charisma had made him a celebrity on 4 continents. He was also a native Hawaiian whose ancestors had lived and played on the very beaches now controlled by the hotel. When the Royal Hawaiian opened, Duke became part of its entertainment ecosystem. He gave surfing demonstrations for tourists. He stood on the beach and posed for photographs. He performed his own culture as a hotel amenity. There is no record that Duke resented this role. He was by all accounts a gracious and generous man who genuinely loved sharing Hawaiian ocean culture with the world. But the structural reality beneath his personal grace was brutal. A native Hawaiian man was performing the traditions of his ancestors on his ancestors' land for the profit of the same corporate oligarchy that had helped depose his people's queen. The smile was real. The system was not. And then there was the paradox of Princess Pauahi's trust. The Bishop estate, which leased the Helumoa land to Castle and Cook, and used the lease revenue to fund Kamehameha schools, the institution Pauahi had created in her will to educate Hawaiian children. The arrangement meant that the education of native Hawaiian youth was financially dependent on the commercial success of a luxury hotel built on sacred Hawaiian ground. The better the hotel performed, the more money flowed to Hawaiian schools. The more Hawaiian culture was packaged and sold to tourists, the more resources were available to teach Hawaiian children about their heritage. This was not an accident. It was the deep logic of the system. Colonization does not always forbid the colonized culture. Sometimes it finds a way to profit from it. The Royal Hawaiian did not ban hula. It scheduled hula performances. It did not erase Hawaiian music. It hired Hawaiian musicians to play in the lobby. It did not ignore Hawaiian history. It curated it, selecting the elements that enhanced the guest experience and quietly discarding the rest. The game stones were removed. The hula dancers were retained. The decision about what survived and what disappeared was made not by Hawaiians, but by hotel managers answering to mainland shareholders. Through the late 1920s, the machine hummed. Occupancy rates were high. The society columns kept writing. The Malolo kept sailing. And within the pink walls, a fantasy took hold so completely that the people inside it, guests and staff alike, could be forgiven for believing it was real. The sunset was real. The ocean was real. The flowers were real. Only the story was manufactured. The Royal Hawaiian was selling paradise. And the cruelest part was that paradise had actually existed here, and for centuries, before the men who sold it had drained it dry. But no machine runs forever. And the one that Edward Tenney built was about to meet two forces that would shake its foundations to the sand. Chapter 7. The Day the Music Stopped Twice. The stock market crash of 1929 nearly killed the Royal Hawaiian, but what came next almost erased it entirely. The first blow arrived on a Tuesday. On October 29, 1929, the New York Stock Exchange lost roughly $14 billion in a single day. The collapse rippled across the Pacific in waves. The wealthy Americans who filled the Royal Hawaiian's rooms were the same people watching their portfolios disintegrate. Within months, bookings dried up. The Malolo sailed from San Francisco with empty cabins. The lobby of the Pink Palace, designed for 1,200 guests, echoed with the footsteps of dozens. The numbers were punishing. The Territorial Hotel Company, the Big Five subsidiary that managed the Royal Hawaiian, posted deepening losses year after year. Occupancy rates that had hovered near capacity in 1928 fell to levels that could not cover operating costs. Castle and Cooke, the parent company that had financed the hotel's construction, eventually wrote off its entire investment. $4 million, the equivalent of roughly $70 million today, reduced to a line item on a balance sheet of regret. The grand scheme that had seemed so elegant in 1925 was, by 1933, a monument to bad timing. The hotel did not close. It survived on reduced rates, skeleton staffing, and the dogged optimism of its managers, who kept the grounds maintained and the staff uniformed even as the guest count dwindled. There were still tourists. There were still sunsets. There was still the ocean. But the machine was no longer humming. It was coughing. Then, slowly, recovery began. By the late 1930s, bookings improved. The American economy was stabilizing. Pan American Airways had begun flying boat service from the mainland, cutting travel time dramatically and opening Hawaii to a new class of visitor. The hotel was not back to its opening night glory, but it was alive. The future, if not bright, was at least visible. Then came December 7th, 1941. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor unfolded just miles from the Royal Hawaiian. Guests and staff heard the explosions. They saw the smoke rising from the harbor. Within hours, the United States was at war, and Waikiki was a military zone. The transformation was immediate and absolute. The Navy requisitioned the Royal Hawaiian on February 1st, 1942, exactly 15 years to the day after its grand opening. The symbolism was accidental but perfect. Concertina wire was strung across the beach. Machine gun positions were dug into the sand. The famous pink facade, a beacon visible for miles from sea, was blacked out. Windows were covered or painted over. The hotel that had been designed to attract attention from across the Pacific now needed to hide from it. The Navy packed the hotel with servicemen. 3 soldiers or sailors were assigned to rooms designed for one wealthy couple. The custom furniture was removed or damaged. The grounds were turned into recreation areas for men on rest and relaxation leave from combat in the Pacific Theater. Over the course of the war, more than 200,000 military personnel passed through the Royal Hawaiian, sleeping in rooms where Rockefellers had slept, eating in a dining room where Hollywood stars had danced. One detail from the war years captures the strangeness of the moment. Before the Navy took control, hotel managers sealed the wine cellar behind a false wall. Thousands of bottles of vintage wine were bricked up and hidden, invisible to the servicemen who walked past them daily for nearly 4 years. The wine survived the war untouched, discovered only when the hotel was returned to civilian management. A treasure hidden in plain sight, behind plaster, in a building made of secrets. The war transformed more than the hotel. It transformed Hawaii. Hundreds of thousands of mainland Americans passed through the islands in uniform. They experienced the climate, the beauty, the aloha that even wartime could not entirely suppress. And they remembered. When the war ended, many of them wanted to come back. The Royal Hawaiian had served as an accidental advertisement for post-war tourism, converting soldiers into future vacationers. But the war also set in motion forces that would dismantle the very system that had built the Pink Palace. The men who would lead that dismantling were, at that very moment, fighting and dying on battlefields in Europe. They were the sons of plantation workers, and they were coming home. Hawaiian Chapter 8, The Revolution They Never Saw Coming. The men who built the Royal Hawaiian never imagined that the children of their plantation workers would one day take their power. The irony was structural and almost mathematical. The Big Five had imported tens of thousands of laborers from Japan, China, the Philippines, Portugal, and Korea to work the sugar fields. They had deliberately kept these groups separated, housed in ethnic camps, paid at different rates, pitted against each other during strikes. The system was designed to prevent solidarity. It worked for decades, and then it didn't. The generation born in those plantation camps was different. They grew up American, they attended public schools together, played on the same sports teams, and spoke English as a common language. The walls their parents had lived behind began to feel artificial. And when war came, many of them, particularly the Japanese American men, volunteered to prove their loyalty in a country that had questioned it. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team became the most decorated unit of its size in United States Army history. Composed almost entirely of Japanese Americans, many from Hawaii, the 442nd fought in Italy and France with a ferocity that earned over 18,000 individual decorations, including 21 Medals of Honor. these men had fought fascism in Europe while their families faced discrimination at home. They returned to Hawaii with medals on their chests and a very simple question. If we are American enough to die for this country, are we American enough to run it? The answer took a decade. In 1946, the first major post-war sugar strike paralyzed Hawaii's plantations for 79 days. The strike was organized by the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union, and for the first time, workers of all ethnicities walked out together. The Big Five strategy of ethnic division had finally, catastrophically failed. The strike did not break the plantation system overnight, but it cracked the foundation. Meanwhile, the Royal Hawaiian was undergoing its own transformation. The Navy returned the hotel in 1947, and Castle and Cook poured $2 million into renovations to repair the wartime damage. The pink paint was refreshed, the furniture was replaced, the wine, retrieved from behind its false wall, was presumably served. The hotel reopened to civilians on February 1st, 1947, 20 years to the day after the original opening. Again, the date was symbolic. The Pink Palace was trying to reset, to return to the glamour of its golden age. But the Hawaii it reopened into was a different place. The 1954 general election became known as the Democratic Revolution, a coalition of labor organizers, Japanese-American veterans, Filipino workers, and progressive reformers swept the Big Five's Republican allies out of office. For the first time since the overthrow, political power in Hawaii was not controlled by the missionary-descended oligarchy. The children and grandchildren of plantation laborers now held the legislature. The men who had conceived the Royal Hawaiian, who had drawn the grand scheme, who had controlled 36 plantations and one shipping line, and the government itself, watched their political empire collapse. The economic power remained significant, but the monopoly was broken. The Big Five began to diversify, restructure, and slowly fade from dominance. The closed system that had funneled Hawaiian wealth to San Francisco shareholders was developing leaks that could not be patched. The hotel survived the revolution. It had survived the Depression and the war, and it would survive the end of oligarchy. But it was no longer the crown jewel of a system. It was becoming something else, a historical artifact of the machine that built it, standing on the beach while the world it was designed for dissolved around it. What came next would finish the transformation, and it would arrive, fittingly, from the sky. Chanda Chapter 9, when paradise went on sale to everyone. Statehood and jet engines did what depression and war could not. They made the Royal Hawaiian obsolete. On August 21, 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state. The event was celebrated across the islands with parades, fireworks, and a sense of arrival. For the business community, statehood meant political stability, federal investment, and the end of territorial limbo. For the tourism industry, it meant something even more powerful: legitimacy. Hawaii was no longer an exotic territory somewhere out in the Pacific. It was America, and Americans could now visit their newest state with the comfortable feeling that they were still at home. The second force was mechanical. In 1959, the same year as statehood, a jet aircraft began scheduled commercial service to Honolulu. What had taken 4.5 days by ship or 12 hours by propeller plane could now be accomplished in 5 hours from California. The journey that had once been an ocean voyage, a luxury in itself, became a commute, and the price dropped accordingly. A Matson cruise had been the province of the wealthy. A jet ticket was within reach of the middle class, The consequences for Waikiki were immediate and irreversible. Tourist arrivals, which had been measured in the tens of thousands through the 1950s, exploded to hundreds of thousands and then millions. The small cluster of hotels that had existed alongside the Royal Hawaiian was overwhelmed by demand. Developers arrived. Zoning changed. Concrete towers began rising along the beach. In 1959, Yamatsun, the shipping company that had conceived and built the Royal Hawaiian as part of its grand scheme, sold the hotel to the Sheraton chain. The sale was an admission. The vertically integrated tourism machine, ship to hotel to golf course, was obsolete. Jet travel had severed the link between the ship and the hotel. Guests no longer arrived on Matson vessels. The closed loop was broken. Sheraton brought corporate hotel management and a national reservation system. It also brought expansion. In 1969, the 17-story Royal Hawaiian Tower was added to the property, a concrete slab that dwarfed the original 6-story Pink building. The tower added modern rooms and increased capacity, but it also fundamentally altered the character of the hotel. The Pink Palace, once the commanding presence on the beach, and was now the quaint elder sibling of a high-rise. The Waikiki that surrounded it was barely recognizable. Where there had been a few low-rise hotels and the Coconut Grove, there were now dozens of high-rises standing shoulder to shoulder along the shore. The beach itself had been engineered, with sand imported from other islands to widen and maintain a shoreline that natural erosion would have reduced. Even the ocean view was managed. The Royal Hawaiian's famous sightline, an unobstructed sweep from lobby to horizon, was hemmed in by towers on either side. In 1974, the Japanese hotel group Kiyo-Ya acquired the Royal Hawaiian. The acquisition was part of a wave of Japanese investment in Hawaiian real estate that would accelerate through the 1980s, and as Japan's booming economy sent capital flowing into prime Pacific properties. The irony was not lost on observers. A hotel built by the oligarchy that had overthrown the Hawaiian queen was now owned by a corporation from the nation whose attack on Pearl Harbor had turned the hotel into a barracks. By the 1980s, the Royal Hawaiian was one hotel among many. It retained its famous color, its beachfront position, and its historical mystique. But it was no longer the singular jewel of Waikiki. It was a brand managed by Sheraton, owned by Japanese investors, competing with Hiltons and Hyatts for the same tourist dollars. The machine that the Big Five had built had worked too well. They had made Hawaii so desirable that mass tourism overwhelmed the exclusive paradise they had created. The $14 a night refuge of Rockefellers was now a stop on every package tour. The Pink Palace still stood, but the world it had been built to dominate had outgrown it completely, and the most painful transformation was still ahead, buried in the fine print of a real estate transaction that would sever the last living link between the hotel and the Hawaiian princess who had tried to protect this land forever. Chapter 10: $85 million of Memory. In 2008, a team of architects was asked to restore the Royal Hawaiian. But the real question was, restore it to what? The renovation was massive. $85 million was spent over 2 years to return the hotel to its original glamour. Workers stripped away decades of additions, modifications, and well-intentioned updates that had gradually buried the 1920s design beneath layers of corporate hospitality. The original Spanish Moorish arches were uncovered and repaired. The coral pink exterior was repainted in a shade matched to historical photographs. Custom furnishings were designed to echo the period's aesthetic. The lobby was returned to something approaching its opening night grandeur. The restoration was, by every technical measure, a success. Architecture critics praised the attention to detail. Guests responded to the recovered elegance. The hotel reopened under the Luxury Collection brand, a Marriott designation reserved for properties with historical or cultural significance. The room rate, once $14, now started at $500 per night and climbed steeply from there. But the renovation exposed a philosophical problem that no amount of money could solve. The 1920s design that the architects were restoring was itself an act of erasure. The Spanish Moorish architecture had been chosen specifically because it was not Hawaiian. The pink color came from Lisbon. The arches came from Andalusia. The aesthetic was imported from everywhere except the place where the building stood. To restore the hotel to its original form was to lovingly preserve the moment when Hawaiian identity was overwritten with a European fantasy. What of the land's deeper history? The Helumoa coconut grove, once 10,000 trees stretching across the royal retreat, was now a small curated garden of carefully maintained palms. The ancient game stones unearthed during construction had long since disappeared. No plaque marked the spot where they were found. No exhibit explained what had been removed to build the hotel. The restoration preserved the building's memory. The land's memory remained unaddressed. The hotel's cultural programming continued and expanded after the renovation. Hula performances were held on the oceanfront lawn. Lei-making classes were offered to guests. Hawaiian language was used in signage and greeting. But these elements existed within the framework of hospitality scheduling. Hula was performed at a set time. Lei-making had a reservation list. Culture was available between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. Compliments of the Marriott Luxury Collection. This was not malice. It was the logical endpoint of the system that Edward Tenney and William Roth had designed a century earlier. The machine converted culture into amenity. The restoration had simply upgraded the machine. New paint, same engine. And even as the renovation was being celebrated, the ground beneath the hotel was about to change hands one final time. Chapter 11. $510 million of goodbye. In November 2025, the last piece of Princess Pauahi's gift was sold to a corporation based in Tokyo. The sale was announced quietly. Kamehameha Schools, the institution that Bernice Pauahi Bishop had created in her will to educate Hawaiian children in perpetuity, sold the 10.3 acres beneath the Royal Hawaiian Hotel and the adjacent Sheraton Waikiki to Daisho Co., a Japanese investment firm. The price was $510 million. It was the largest single real estate transaction in Waikiki history. And to understand what was lost, you have to go back to the will. When Princess Pauahi died in 1884, she was the last direct descendant of the Kamehameha dynasty, the royal line that had unified the Hawaiian Islands. She was also one of the largest landowners in the kingdom. She left her lands, roughly 360,000 acres, in a trust with explicit instructions. The land was to be held, and the income from it was to fund schools for Hawaiian children. The land itself was the gift, not the money the land could generate, the land. She understood, as so many Hawaiians did, that land was not merely property, it was identity, it was ancestry, it was the physical body of the culture. For over a century, the trust honored this vision. And Kamehameha Schools leased the land beneath the Royal Hawaiian and collected revenue that helped fund one of the most well-endowed private school systems in the United States. The arrangement was imperfect. It was the same paradox that had existed since the hotel opened. Hawaiian education funded by commercial exploitation of Hawaiian heritage. But the land remained in Hawaiian hands. The trust held until it didn't. The decision to sell was described by trust leaders as a financial strategy. Concentrating such a large portion of the trust's wealth in a single property created risk. Diversifying into other investments would better serve the long-term financial health of the institution. The reasoning was sound by the standards of modern portfolio theory. It was also the final act in a transfer that had taken 140 years. The chairwoman of the Kamehameha Schools Board acknowledged the weight of the decision. There was pain in selling land. The words were carefully chosen and clearly sincere. But the transaction was completed. The ground where Hawaiian kings had played, where a princess had decreed education over exploitation, where 10,000 coconut palms had once stood, now belonged to a Tokyo-based corporation. Trace the ownership in a single line. For 4 centuries, the land belonged to Hawaiian royalty, then to a princess who gave it to her people's children. Then it was leased to the oligarchy that had helped overthrow the queen, then managed by an American hotel chain, then owned by a Japanese investment group. And now, the land itself, the last thread connecting the Royal Hawaiian to anything Hawaiian at all, was sold at $510 million, the price of goodbye. Chapter 12. The Fantasy That Refuses to Die. Nearly 100 years after it opened, the Pink Palace still sells the same lie, and millions still buy it gladly. Walk through the lobby of the Royal Hawaiian today, and the fantasy is seamless. The pink walls glow in the afternoon light. Plumeria blossoms float in decorative bowls. A ukulele player sits beneath the coconut palms of Helumoa and plays songs that tourists will hum on their flights home. The staff greets you with aloha, a word that carries a universe of Hawaiian meaning compressed into a hospitality brand standard. Everything is beautiful, everything is curated, and nothing is what it appears to be. Joni Mitchell knew. In 1970, she recorded Big Yellow Taxi, a song about environmental destruction wrapped in an irresistibly catchy melody. She referenced a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hotspot. The lyrics were about paving paradise. She was writing about the Royal Hawaiian, or something very much like it. And the song became one of the most recognizable environmental protest songs in history. The irony is that the song is now the kind of thing a ukulele player might perform in the Royal Hawaiian's lobby, a protest about the destruction of paradise, converted into a pleasant entertainment for the people who purchased the destruction. The Royal Hawaiian approaches its centennial in 2027. If it reaches that date, and there is every indication that it will have survived the overthrow of a monarchy, the draining of a wetland, the Great Depression, a world war, a political revolution, statehood, the jet age, a 17-story tower, a corporate acquisition, an $85 million renovation, and the sale of the ground it stands on. It has outlived the oligarchy that built it, the shipping company that conceived it, and the Hawaiian kingdom on whose ruins it rose. It may well outlive the culture it commodifies. The numbers that define the Royal Hawaiian today are as revealing as the numbers that define the system that built it. $500 a night for a standard room. Over 1 million tourists visiting Waikiki every month. $510 million for 10 acres of land that was once gifted to Hawaiian children. 90% of Hawaii's economy once controlled by 5 companies. 60 tons of stucco. 10,000 gallons of pink paint. and 0 ulu mica stones on display. The building remains one of the most photographed structures in the Pacific. Its image appears on postcards, Instagram feeds, and travel brochures in a dozen languages. Tourists stand in front of the pink facade and smile. They are standing on the same ground where Hawaiian chiefs rolled game stones. They are standing above the buried memory of fish ponds and taro fields. They are standing on land that a princess tried to protect, that an oligarchy leased, that a chain managed, and that a foreign corporation now owns. They do not know any of this, and the hotel is designed so that they never will. That is the machine's final achievement. Not the rooms, not the cocktails, not even the profit. The machine's masterpiece is the erasure of its own history. And the Royal Hawaiian does not hide its past because there is a conspiracy of silence. It hides its past because the past was the point. The entire project, from the overthrow to the canal, to the construction, to the opening night, was an exercise in replacement. Replace the queen with a committee. Replace the wetland with dry land. Replace the Hawaiian gathering place with a Spanish palace. Replace the game stones with a foundation. Replace the culture with a schedule of performances. Replace the meaning with a price. And call it paradise. The question is not whether the Royal Hawaiian is beautiful. It is. The question is not whether the tourists are wrong to enjoy it. Pleasure is not a crime. The question, the one that Liliuokalani asked and Pauahi tried to answer, and the ulu mica stones silently pose from wherever they were discarded, is simpler than any of that. Whose paradise is it? The pink walls do not answer. They never have. They were never meant to.